what has drawn a lot of people, I think, to the work that I've done so far is my commentary on other content, and I realise that there are some potential risks with doing so, but I really do enjoy it and I miss it a lot, and so I think today we're going to give it another go. Hello, Brittany. Good to see you. Good to see you. How are you doing, Brittany? Welcome to the chat, to the stream. Come on, Figgy. I'm looking at you. I know you've got something to say. Let me turn down the music a little bit. Welcome back, Auties, to the dark side of autism content creation. Today we're going to be having a look at a video from Michelle Marner. Help. How do I handle a friend who fakes disorders? I'm not sure what this is going to bring for us, but let's get into it.
This realm of people on social media who fake disorders that they often tend to be specific ones. Things like ASD, DID, ADHD, these seem to be kind of trending on social media at times. In some of the stories we've talked about with people faking, they would kind of switch from one that happens to be trending at the moment and then a new one is trending and they switch to that one. In story number 2, we're going to be hearing of someone who would like advice for a friend who they believe is faking disorders. They claim to have DID, an alter with ASD, and a persecutor who is just allowed to say whatever they want because, hey, they're a persecutor, even though a lot of people with DID do not like that term. How would you approach a friend who you believe might be faking? Make sure to give this video a thumbs up, subscribe, and let's get into the video.
I don't particularly understand like the concept of like autism being a trending thing. From my maybe when it comes to TikTok, because I know that on TikTok it can be quite a thing, but like surely there are more things that you can talk about to sort of gain views, gain subscribers and followers other than talking about autism and such. I do realize that potentially, like nowadays, now that sort of the neurodivergent movements come through and all of the different entities, the different sort of disorders and stuff which would come under that are being sort of pushing each other up. There's getting a lot more autism awareness and acceptance, and obviously a lot more people looking into it because of, you know, late diagnosed individuals, people trying to learn more about themselves, people not putting all of their faith in the medical system for picking them up, highlighting them, getting them support when they need it. Hello, Bree. Good to see you. How are you doing? Don't know how long I've been a member. Me judging time pretty bad. Faking disorders is a BPD issue from what I hear. Yeah, well, I think the main issue that I have with a lot of content on faking disorders is that it's very difficult to say if that person is faking it. You don't know. I think a lot of the time that there are specific cases where you can say, you know, this is a little bit suspect if they said something and they go back on their words, and you know, I can sort of see that to a certain degree. But I don't know. It's a very shaky line to walk, and a lot of the people who are making these comments about how this person can't be autistic particularly will also say in the same hands that someone who is not a doctor cannot, you know, self-identify autism, which is, you know, it's a bit of a, what do you call it, a paradox, misnomer? I don't know what the word would be. Autism being trending is probably because a lot of people discovering they might be autistic, so looking for more information. For sure. I think there aren't as many fakers as what people think. Yes, no, exactly, Cat Lily. It's something that people watch this faking thing, and then they apply what they've seen onto other people's content. Even if they might be, you know, even if they are autistic, they might think, oh, there's so much faking around these days that everyone that they see, you know, they comment and they say like, you know, this person's faking it for attention and views. It's kind of like their default sort of response to this type of thing, you know, rather than treating each circumstance for its merits. I think some of the pushback against, for instance, advocating for autism screening for individuals who suspect they may be autistic is because everyone struggles in life in general. And if they have contempt for the idea of being patient with or making special considerations for people. Yeah, people don't want to, especially people who have a very individualistic mindset. You know, everyone's sort of put in the melting pot of life and society, and you have to battle to get what you want. You know, we shouldn't be making, you know, changing the way that we do stuff to accommodate people, because we are, you know, sort of bowing down to the masses in a sense. Good evening, Tracy. We are watching a video on how to handle a friend who fakes disorders. Let's see what they have to say.
I've seen a common pattern amongst fakers. They almost always seem to fake the most random disorders, but they all collectively fake them together. For example, I've seen so many people fake things like DID, BPD, or autism, but I've almost never seen anybody fake things like conduct disorder or hoarding disorder. I'm not saying that people don't fake these disorders, because I'm sure they probably do, but they aren't as popular to fake. Is this something that only I seem to notice? I would love to hear your thoughts. If you do have any
conduct disorder, hoarding disorder, I don't know. I think generally, if someone was wanting to bait people for attention and views, they would pick ones that are sort of more known about. It kind of makes sense, I guess.
If you have any of the conditions stated in this story, I'd be curious what you think about your disorder and it being faked. I mean, borderline personality disorder, for example, has been compared to having third-degree burns on your body. That is how painful it is emotionally. Along with DID, formed from complex childhood trauma, which is accompanied by PTSD. The answer might lie in their increased visibility online, making them more likely to be faked, and in the good part, discussed. It is a good thing to discuss mental illness when you're not stigmatizing these disorders. This increases the likelihood of people online claiming to have these conditions, whether they do or don't have them. Apps like TikTok, Tumblr, Twitter have these subcultures where the disorder is more visible and can even be romanticized. Humans are social and pack animals, and if we can't find a niche that...
I don't know, because, like, who's deciding whether something is being stigmatized? You know, I think that there is always going to be an element of subjectivity to it. You know, when she says things like romanticized, she may think that, you know, somebody who, like myself, who sees autism as a, you know, complex web of both positive and negative traits, that I'm romanticizing being autistic. You know, perhaps people like this may see, you know, autistic pride, someone being happy and sort of comfortable in themselves, and, you know, trying to help other people feel more comfortable about being autistic as romanticizing. It's not uncommon. It really depends on your perspective, I suppose. Sarah says, I had a conversation with someone who thinks autism is CPTSD due to not receiving as much affection as a baby. Yeah, that's a very, very, very common sort of scientific thing. Not scientific thing, rather. It was I think derived from this idea of the refrigerator mother hypothesis, whereby cold, sort of unfeeling mothers cause their children to not receive as much affection and therefore grow up autistic, which has been debunked. It's completely, you know, it's one of those stigmas that does actually surround autism parents, which is completely wrong. However, autistic people are much more likely to develop CPTSD, as per the conversations that I've had with Dr. Megan Neff, registered psychologist, particularly focusing on neurodivergencies. I've done a podcast with her, and there are factors to consider on you know, someone developing the complex version of PTSD due to their sort of unique brain structure. But I mean, the rates of PTSD amongst autistic people are pretty high anyways. So it's hard to, as you said, like the chicken or the egg thing, is, you know, it's hard to say. But I think the fact that autism is a neurodevelopmental condition, so you're born with it, you develop an autistic brain in the womb, it does kind of provide a bit of a more stable view on it. You know, it's more likely that CPTSD is as a result of being autistic in this world, perhaps. I'd like to see a minimalist fake being a horde. Interesting. Bree says, geez, I had a 5-hour back and forth with the manager today because he thinks top down and I think bottom up. Every time he asked a question, I'd respond with obscure detail when he wanted a summary. I understand that. leave anything to just run wild for 30, 40 years and they get out of hand. Yeah, I suppose so. Some people, it either doesn't or does less, and it certainly does have its drawbacks. Yeah, no, yeah, of course. I mean, we can get into a whole conversation about sort of the what the conceptualization of autism should be, you know, but this isn't the video to do it, I don't think. Refrigerator mother thing is very sexist as well. Yes. Autism comes before CPTSD. You got it, Cat Lily.
That we fit into, we might force ourselves into one. You know, I'm sitting here with these things that I perceive as symptoms of BPD. What's better, sitting with them alone or going online and claiming to have it and getting all of this attention for it? Along with, it's more convenient to fake disorders that are more internal, although Tourette's is one of them.
Eeny, meeny, miny, mo. Catch a tiger, he's a hoe!
Or in cases of DID where the disorder is less...
I think we touched on this idea a while ago, this like Tourette's thing. Usually when people create content, they do so, like, it's hard to explain. But for example, if I was going to make a video about autistic shutdowns, I wouldn't just have my camera around me, you know, trying to pick up when I'm going to have an autistic shutdown and record myself doing so because it's quite intrusive. But I may act like I am having a shutdown for like the visual aspect of the video that someone does. So I think when it comes to things like Tourette's, you know, anything that's kind of out there, very physical in nature, you've always got to think of, you know, they are making a video about it. They may be having some fun with it. They may be, you know, all sorts of different things. I'm not too sure. I'm not really in with the Tourette's community, so I couldn't say. But I think it's worth keeping in mind that social media is a constructed thing anyway. And so if you're going to speak about things such as that, you want to have videos which are like that, in a sense. Tandava says Tourette's lends itself to short visual videos because of its visually expressive nature, for better or worse. Yeah. And I'm not saying that these people aren't putting it on for the camera. I'm just saying they could have Tourette's, but be putting it on for the camera in this instant, you know. I'm sure people with it for real aren't thrilled about it for the most part. Yeah, but again, like, we don't know if these people actually do have it or not, you know. Unless we pull up their records. You know. A video about the difference between Tourette's and tics would be interesting. Tourette's is the name for the diagnosis, and there's some stipulations on the length and the breadth of the amount of tics that someone has, but tics are the names for the actual things. But there's some stipulations in the diagnosis when it comes to Tourette's.
Less research than, I don't know, things like anxiety disorders. DID especially, it leaves more to the imagination, where people are kind of saying it's like role-playing the DSM. Some people who fake disorders, it almost seems like they want to elicit like this attention and sympathy, which sounds so bad to say, but if someone says,
listen, I went through extreme childhood trauma and that's why I have DID, but that's why it's okay for me to do all of these negative things on you.
And then of course, when it comes to things like BPD or ADHD, a lot of us have symptoms of these without...
I don't know, I wouldn't say that every time that someone speaks about negative experiences in their past, that they're doing so for sympathy and views. Like, wonders if it's just their past and the reality, and helps sort of bring a personal angle to what they're talking about, something that they may have experienced themselves through life. I wouldn't say that that's always the case, but definitely if they're using that to justify, if they're using anything to justify ill behavior towards other people, I think I agree with that for sure. You know, you can get the same with, you know, particular autistic people out there who sort of dismiss their bad words, their mean words towards other people or actions, by saying that they're autistic and they've gone through trauma, which I don't agree with particularly. I don't think that's something that you can... It might be an explanation to why, but it still doesn't absolve you from taking responsibility for it. That's for sure. Some autistic people have cold mothers and some don't. Yeah, but there's not particularly any link between developing autism and such. Hello, Nutcracker. Welcome.
without actually having it, so we might actually just convince ourselves that we do have it. Someone on Reddit had something really interesting to say about this.
Syndrome.
In my opinion, because those are easier to fake, and they can be turned off and on easier. If you're faking hoarding disorder, you have to live in a cramped room full of stuff and use a lot of your money to buy useless items. If you're faking autism, it's more versatile. If a faker forgets to present in a typical autistic way, they can just claim that it's a spectrum and they felt better on that day. And one can take their normal interests and blow them into special interests. As a diagnosed
They felt better on that day. Hey guys, today I've recovered enough from my autism to speak properly. Yeah, that's how it works. I understand the sentiment and the logic. Yeah, that makes sense, I guess. But I think that they're going to be talking about normal interests and blow them up into special interests. I think that there's importance in the actual term, you know, being that they are like lifelong things that often require a lot of your attention and your free time, that you just want to do everything around, and you listen to the music. If you had a special interest with perhaps Game of Thrones, because I'm rewatching Game of Thrones at the moment, I might listen to the soundtrack while I'm working. I might plaster myself with tattoos about Game of Thrones. I might, you know, go very far in depth into it in every different part of my life. We use special interests in teaching to help kids become more engaged with their work, because, you know, you assign them a task which is related to something that they already enjoy and think about constantly, and it works. But you can have special interests like that, which are, you know, very all-consuming, but you can also have interests. I think it depends on the terminology. But yeah, I'm you know, people could, again, like the thing is with social media, you're making something, you're editing it, like you can construct it any way you like, and it's not just a glimpse, not a window into someone's life. That is for sure. I'm a hoarder. It's complicated. She's generalizing. I'm sorry to hear that, Sarah. Borderline isn't a fake disorder. No, it isn't. But I think that they're not arguing that these are fake disorders. They're arguing that people fake these disorders. I felt better from my autism. Oh, good. In all seriousness, it could be like anxiety, social anxiety, whatever that avoiding the demand thing is. What, like the path of PDA? Yeah, I mean, definitely, like, people can do so. I'd always try and question if you are someone who, and saying it like the people who watch these videos would watch mine. But if you are watching these videos, just, you know, keep a level of level-headedness about it. You know, you can't really tell what someone is like unless there is definitive evidence that can't be misconstrued that this person is not, that he doesn't have this disorder, because it's a dangerous game to play, because it's such a common thing for people like myself and other autistic people to be labeled as faking or looking for attention, where you know, the motives, the intentions sort of behind the work that we might do, you have no idea about, you know?
Most autistic person, I couldn't testify to how a normal interest feels, but I'll use Has Been Hotel for example. You like Has Been Hotel, you think the characters are cool, and you're a lonely 12-year-old. You pretend to have them as alters. Also, the use of being quirky and
That's not a special interest.
Is another way to feel.
That is not a special interest. What? Oh, yeah. I think a better comparison there would be, they enjoy watching Has Been Hotel and they have like a plushie of it or something, other than, you know, changing their style and their hair to match one of their characters, and, you know, listening to the soundtrack and watching it on repeat every night. I think that would be a better comparison for sure.
feel a part of a group. A majority of adolescents spend most of their time trying to fit in, and in the fact that DID is a niche, and most fakers commonly present with introjects, strongly based off of one piece of fiction, like the DSMP or Has-Been Hotel. Then, fit into their selected niche better, the 12-year-old starts faking DID. It could even be seen the same way with adults, as they generally only are friends and dating fellow systems, simply because they are still trying to fit in. But make sure to come.
Well, here's a question which I think is important to talk about. Are they faking it, or do they have a delusion? Because it does happen. particularly autistic people growing up can develop delusions. I developed like delusions that I was some kind of different alien creature being when I was younger, because it was the only way that I could sort of cope and try and understand why I was different at that age. Like that 12-year-old, I don't imagine that are trying to garner attention and views to produce a career. I think they're probably just, you know, a little bit deluded, and they're 12 years old. Are they faking it, or do they have delusion? Very valid perspective. Yeah, so, I mean, even in the case that they do not actually have the disorder, there is other factors to consider, especially if they're a lot younger, which is the aspect of delusion that can happen for people, for sure. It doesn't necessarily mean that they're faking dissociative identity disorder. It just may be that they're delusional, you know. And getting hate comments about how they're trying to gather attention and, you know, all of that stuff in this instance with a 12-year-old doesn't really sound like the best course of action. I don't think. Like, it's not. And the comments about people wanting to be a part of a group and fit in, for sure. I think the majority of the human race would say that having some form of community is important. And usually, due to the nature of autism and how isolating it can be to be autistic in the autism case, finding a community, finding people who are similar, who can offer advice, who can offer friendship and understanding is obviously going to be a very good thing. I don't think there's anything particularly wrong with that. But this isn't saying that people can't do this and that people can't have delusions, because that would be wrong. I'm just saying I think a moderate amount of, you know, sort of stepping back and like trying to understand it, rather than, you know, blurting out that they're trying to get popularity and fame and sympathy would be an ideal thing to do. What do you guys think? I dissociate with depersonalization, derealization, and it's not like most people think. I was a fae, and in my mind I still feel my wings, but I know they are my imagination. Yeah, well, I think for me, like, I was the same as the derealization, depersonalization, the not feeling like you really exist, and what, you know, not feeling attached to what you see in the mirror, and the aspects of not feeling like the world is really, you know, existing, which are common reactions, particularly when you're going through traumatic or difficult experiences, where, you know, through life, like I did when I was in secondary school. Like, those happen, and, you know, we try to find some level of understanding about why we're feeling this way, and for some people, they land upon a diagnosis that they've seen, or they land upon a concept, or, you know, something that helps explain and helps comfort them, you know. I can imagine that could happen. As doubt, especially sort of, when I was a kid, I thought God was talking to me because I was told that in church, so I became deluded thinking my inner thoughts were actually God. That messed me up for a while. That's very interesting. I do think that there are some bad actors who actively try to abuse appropriating various potential disabilities, including autism, but I don't think that represents the majority of people either. No. I think the majority of people who may be doing that are probably deluded teens, young people, or as you said, they're trying to gather attention. But I don't think, you know, the people talk a lot about similar sort of topics like self-ID, you know, self-diagnosis, all that, and they do the same. You know, there are some people who think that everybody is doing this, and they're all faking autism, and they're all wrongly self-identifying and all that, and you just don't know, really. Like you can, the only thing you can do really, I think the important thing to do, like in any circumstance, is to give people of the internet an honest account of who you are and what you represent. I think if you want to create content as perhaps a self-identified individual, I think it's important to tell people that, but I don't think it should withhold you from having an active voice within the community. It just needs to be something that people know about, you know? Wrong planet syndrome.
Sure to comment below your ideas or something that I may have missed, because it is a very complex
This one's called
question.
Reddit's Thoughts.
Hey, I'm mostly looking for advice on how to approach someone who actively fakes disorders. I've known this person for a while, and it seems like every week they have a new disorder, and it's kind of exhausting. I'm not accusing them out of nowhere. I know I'm not a licensed doctor, but when they said they had schizophrenia and I asked them if they hallucinate visibly or audibly, they said no. It's honestly pretty disrespectful considering how many people struggle with these disorders. Another time we were in a group setting where we all got to talk about trauma and PTSD, to which they spoke out. I'm the only one here without trauma. Just to approach me days later with news about their DID and autistic alter? What the heck does that even mean? They also act really freaking weird when they have their persecutor like telling me to f off and shit, and I'm pretty tired of it at the moment. So yeah, I mean, obviously there are
I'd say, like, if this account is completely true, it does, like, if they're just coming out of nowhere with stuff like this, like, I can imagine that it might be quite frustrating, especially if they're using it to be particularly unfavorable towards other people. But I'd say that the best way to handle and help someone who is, you know, doing this kind of thing, put them in touch with a psychologist, a psychiatrist, someone of that nature, to give them some clarity on it. Because the thing is, with diagnoses or like content which sort of looks at sort of signs and things of that nature, you can fit a lot of them but not fit the core aspects of them, you know. So you may fit a lot of the different, you know, signs and sort of downstream effects of having a particular diagnosable condition, but at the same time not having the core aspects of it, or not fully understanding the core aspects of it. And it could be a cry for help, you know, perhaps, I would say. I suspect the majority of people who identify with autism but don't seek support for it aren't trying to appropriate things, but simply understand, communicate, and express. Exactly. Husky Buzz says, I'm autistic because I'm the same way. I'm in the same way I'm gay because I am. Seek no diagnosis, and I've gained nothing but honest friends and relationships from living my truths. Good on you, Husky. Power to Husky. Love to hear it. I don't feel human, but I know I am. Yeah. It's good to see you too, Tanwin. Welcome back, my friend. How are you doing?
are two sides to every story. I can't know whether this person is blatantly faking or what's going on in their head. But some good advice that I've heard before is just straight out ignoring all of this faker stuff. Like, if they bring it up, just change the subject. I mean, a lot of us do that in real life. Like, if someone is talking about something that makes you uncomfortable, like politics, you might be just more inclined to just change the subject, even if that person is still your friend or family member. But at the end of the day, if this does continue and it is distressing for you, it might be worth considering to assess the relationship. Maybe evaluate the importance of your relationship. I mean, if my sister was faking a disorder, I might act differently than if just a person who's kind of my friend but not really faked a disorder. This can help you decide whether or not you want to address this issue, and if so, how. Because at the end of the day, if someone you love is struggling with a maladaptive behavior, would it be appropriate to just leave them or cut them off? I guess that's a huge question. If their behavior is affecting you negatively and you don't want to just cut it off, it's important to set clear boundaries. Let them know that their behaviors are unacceptable to you and how you plan to respond if they continue. When someone we care about uses maladaptive behaviors, our first inclination might be to help them through it. But unfortunately, as much as we help this person, it can be very, very difficult to just completely change their mind. I mean, it kind of goes along the same way of like, just stop faking disorders. I don't know, if someone has an ED, maybe just saying like, well, just don't have an ED. It's like, well, yeah, but what are the underlying reasons why they do have these behaviors?
Yes.
And with this person specifically,
yeah, I think to be honest, what they've been mentioning is sound advice, I would say. I think it really depends. If they're like a friend, you know, I'd assess the relationship, but I would just not try and dismiss any of it. I would just encourage them to go to a psychologist about it, you know. Not saying that all psychologists that you can go to are going to be completely 100% accurate, 'cause we've had a lot of conversations about that, that's for sure. But it's if it's getting in the way of a friendship, and it's you know, if it is happening in this case, in you know, truthfully to these words, then, you know, that does seem a little bit suspect, and it might be indicators of, you know, greater mental health difficulties. So it's worthwhile, you know, perhaps showing compassion, setting boundaries. 100% really important, unstated. You know, when your desire to help somebody, you need to definitely put yourself first, of course, especially if, you know, as I said, they have some maladaptive behaviors which are impacting you. Of course, putting boundaries in place, very important. But, you know, you've got to always remember, even if it is something that's happening, like we do have the Munchausen syndrome that Figgy is talking about, that does happen. And that is also a condition that people can have, where they think that they have a diagnosis or multiple diagnoses and not, to a unhelpful degree for themselves and other people around them. That's true. But, you know, it's not your responsibility to tell them what they are. You need somebody who is trained to sort of help them understand, at least, or help them delve into exactly why and such. They definitely sound like they need some help, though, some support, that's for sure. A person who has delusions, they have disorders, are people who have a Munchausen syndrome, not to be mistaken with Munchausen by proxy. They project it onto others. These things are a struggle and hard to deal with and live with. They're not quirky or a fad. It's infuriating. No, they're not quirky or a fad. They're genuine, out there, like very impactful differences in someone's life, someone's brain. You know, definitely not in that sense. I don't like it when people call it like a trending thing or a fad, because it's just very counterintuitive to the sort of the grassroots of why we're doing this work. You know, why we're talking about autism and different aspects of neurodiversity. You know, people always jump to bad intentions from people. They're trying to make money. They're trying to gain some kind of credit. They're trying to get sympathy. You know, you don't know, really. You don't know. I have a friend who has schizophrenia. I never asked him whether he hears or sees things. I found that question quite a disrespectful question. Well, that's very cautiously nice of you. I would. Is that something that you're not supposed to do? Because I feel like if I was in that situation and someone told me they had schizophrenia, I'd want to understand more about it. But I do have a very curious mind, I suppose. Maybe it is a little bit too much of a sort of a boundary break, perhaps. Autism has certainly become more in vogue, if you will, in recent years. Yeah, I mean, more people are talking about it. That's basically it. I mean, with anything on the internet, there's going to be both positives and negatives that arise, because there are so many people in this world, so many people who use these platforms, who create stuff, that of course, like, there are going to be both positives and negatives to that kind of thing, for sure. I hear and see things. I'm seeing this stream on my laptop and hearing Thomas speak. Oh.
DID or not, it's not a free pass to be disrespectful to you. If you do have a dissociative disorder like DID or OSDD, and you do have an alter who might, I don't know, like lash out on a friend, I've seen a lot of systems collectively decide, like, well, we're not just going to say this alter can't talk to you. Maybe we'll stop talking until I'm at a place where I'm able to talk to you. But at the end of the day, prioritize your self-care. I can't imagine how exhausting this experience must be. Some people in the comments are being like, you should be petty about it. Tell them the diagnostic criteria for schizophrenia and DID, and that their symptoms might not align. But I don't know how I feel about this, because I feel
that's a very intrusive way of approaching it. I don't think it'll end well. You may just push them more into isolation and refuse to seek support for it, I imagine. I think as far as creators who are looking at autism content, this Michelle Manor seems to be particularly quite, moderate with their views. Obviously having a lot of nuance to what they're speaking about, which is quite rare because I haven't really seen much of a content that takes this kind of stance. A lot of it just tends to be, look at these funny people who are doing doing crazy things on the internet to get views. That just tends to be what autism faking cringe stuff tends to be like. But no, I'm sort of pleasantly surprised. It's definitely a good video to comment on, for sure.
I feel like when you fight fire with fire, you'll end up with more, more fire.
Yeah.
Someone on Reddit said, faking, definitely, most likely, or not. Your friend is not doing well. People don't fake disorders when they're in a good place mentally. No. Usually, people who fake disorders do so because they enjoy the feeling of being important, the feeling of individuality, the care and or attention that they receive, or because they can get something specific out of it. In this situation, it additionally seems like your friend is using their self-diagnosis as an excuse to vocalize otherwise taboo feelings of both infatuation and dismay towards you. If this is someone you care very deeply about and whom you'd like to stay in your life, I'd suggest confrontation. I get the point that others are making of ignoring problematic behavior / not rewarding it, but I think it's important to state boundaries. So I'd say, I can see that you have some mental health concerns, but remember that self-diagnosing can be potentially damaging. The disorders that you're speaking of are also very heavy. Let's get you to a psychiatrist who can make a proper assessment so that you can figure out exactly what's up and get the proper care needed. If you are on the fence, I'd take the other's advice of starting to distance yourself. So I guess my question is, what would you do in this situation? I guess I would say I would be more inclined to kind of speak to them about the diagnostic criteria, trying to help them the best that I can, but then when it kind of comes to a point where it's too stressful, you just kind of might disconnect a little bit. I don't know if this is good advice, and I really can't say what I would do until I'm in those shoes, but I don't know. Make sure to give this video a thumbs up, subscribe, turn the bell on if you're feeling risky, and comment below. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I'd say that a lot of what they were speaking about in terms of setting boundaries is definitely the right way to go about things. I don't think trying to disprove them and things of that nature would do much good and other than infuriate them. It's obviously going to be like any advice. Like I made a reel today about, advice that people give. Like any good advice for the incompatible situation will be bad advice. It really depends on the individual circumstances. Like, as much as you can get information about how to act, and like particularly like when it comes to like autism and self-advocacy, it's not always going to work in all situations, and you have to change it, and it's really context dependent, and it's very difficult, and there is an element of having to assess your situation and seeing if that would apply to that situation, modifying it a little bit. So I don't think there's any clear-cut way of going around it. I think the safe option is setting boundaries to protect yourself, because if you have somebody who is very chaotic emotionally around you and it's causing you a lot of stress, you obviously want to try and distance yourself back from that. But I also don't think it's a good thing to try and disprove them, because you're just another person. You want to make sure that they can get some good information, and if anything, some help. If they, as I said, like people don't really fake disorders when they're doing well. I think usually when this happens, there is some deep rooted problems that they're trying to make up for. If they are to do that. Very, very well sort of moderately viewed video. On faking autism. I think some of the stuff is a little bit overgeneralized, and obviously some of the terms aren't particularly favorable, but general a good video to react to. I'd like to know what you guys think down in the comments. I'm planning to find experts on schizophrenia in my area because my friend who really needs support by people who know what they're doing. I'm reading a few books recently. One of the, I don't know if, well, obviously not all of you were here at the start of the stream, but I was talking about dedicating myself to doing a long sort of deep dive on particular issues and sort of speaking about my opinions on them. And I'm looking into how neurodiversity has changed. And there's generally two paradigms that are used, sort of, ideologies perhaps. You have the pathology paradigm, which is like the medical model stuff. You diagnose a problem, you fix it. And then the neurodiversity paradigm, which is kind of like the opposite of it, which is, the problems are caused by the environment. And I don't, especially when speaking about neurodiversity, I don't think that can be applied with such a thick brush, thick black brush over a white canvas. I think it really depends on what you're talking about, to whether you try and help them, treat them or help them sort of deal with it, or whether you help them sort of accept that part and advocate for that part of themselves. It's very difficult to apply that notion generally over everything, I think that's one of the main issues that I'm going to be talking about in that long video that I'm creating. Generally, just like it's very hard to say, it's the neurodiversity bar is like the other side of the coin to the pathology. Applying it to such a wide spectrum of things ultimately sort of is going to be wrong, because it's shades of grey, isn't it? Having autism, being autistic is very different to having Alzheimer's. Both neurological conditions under that, both would be considered to be neurodiversity under some people's conceptualizations of it. Completely different. You definitely want to help autistic people then to work with themselves, educate others, advocate for yourselves. In the case of Alzheimer's, you want to help them, you want to stop it. So I think that they can be applied very, very differently depending on what you're talking about. There's also a model that incorporates both medical and neurodiversity models. What is that called, Calorie? I'd love to know. Isabella says, I would not ignore someone who talks about their mental health, so I don't really know what the problem is. We shouldn't invalidate people's experiences. No, for sure. I think it kind of muddies the water a little bit when that person's behaviour affects you, as a person. If they're saying that they have a mental health condition that makes them lash out at their friends, you definitely need to put some boundaries in there yourself and, consider getting them some help anyway, even if it were true, I think it doesn't really matter if they're faking it or not. There is definitely an issue there that needs to be, have had support for, in a sense. Husky Bus says psychiatry is a modern Western-centric concept, trying to marry the subjective to the objective. That's not to say everything they say will be invalid, but ought to be taken with a grain of salt. Yes, 100%. It ought to be taken in the amount of salt that the evidence speaks for, because psychiatry is by its nature a lot more grey than perhaps the more solid evidence-based sciences. There is a lot of subjectivity, even in the Diagnostic Statistical Manual.